I'm in law enforcement and I work the midnight shift from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. My department is located in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. We have very dense forest and lakes all over. I was out on patrol, heading down a long stretch of road that cut through the heart of the forest. It was around 3 a.m., and the night was unusually quiet. The only sound I could hear was the steady hum of my cruiser's engine and the occasional hoot of an owl. Just as I was about to turn onto a side road, my headlights caught something strange in the distance. It was a large, dark figure moving slowly across the road. I slowed down, initially thinking it was a moose or a bear, both common sights in these parts. But as I got closer, I realized it was something entirely different. This figure was standing on 2 legs, not 4. It was tall, very tall, towering over the tallest deer crossing sign on the side of the road. It was covered in thick, dark hair and had an imposing, muscular frame. As I approached, it turned and looked directly at the cruiser, its eyes reflecting an eerie yellow in the glare of my headlights. I stopped the cruiser, my heart pounding in my chest. I had heard stories of sightings like this from the locals, tales of a large, bipedal creature living in the woods. Stories I had always dismissed as folklore or the overactive imagination of hunters. But here I was, face to face with what looked like the legendary Bigfoot, a creature I had never thought was real. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the creature and I, in the middle of this forest road. It was an uncanny experience, one that made me question the line between the known and the unknown. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the creature turned and disappeared into the dense forest. I sat there for a while, trying to process what I had seen. Was it a trick of the light, or had I really come across a creature of legend? With a deep breath, I slowly started the cruiser and continued my patrol, the image of the creature still vivid in my mind. When I returned to the station, I hesitated before deciding to report what I had seen. My colleagues were skeptical, and I could tell they thought it was a joke. But the local park ranger, an old man who had spent his life navigating the woods of Michigan, didn't laugh. He just nodded, a knowing look in his eyes. From that night forward, every time I patrolled that stretch of road, I couldn't help but look out into the forest, half expecting to see the creature again. Whether it was Bigfoot or not, I may never know. But one thing is for sure, it was something very large, and it made my routine patrol an unforgettable experience. I have been wanting to tell this story for a long time, but I have never had the courage until now because I never knew how people would react. I hope that you will hear me out and give my story a chance. This happened in 2013, but I have had strange occurrences happen to me my whole life. I have always been fascinated with ghosts and the supernatural, but I have never seen anything like what I saw on the night of August 12th, 2013. After my fiancé and I had been dating for 6 years, we decided to spend a weekend at the historic and supposedly haunted Lighthouse Inn, nestled in the small coastal town of Maine. We had always been intrigued by the paranormal, and since we were about to start a new chapter of our lives, we thought, why not indulge in a little adventure before settling down? The inn was an imposing structure, an old lighthouse turned into a bed and breakfast. It was known for its maritime history and chilling ghost stories, particularly of a lighthouse keeper named Samuel who mysteriously vanished in the late 1800s. On our second night, after a day of exploring the quaint town, we returned to our room in the inn. The atmosphere was unusually cold, and I remember the uneasy feeling that washed over me. We laughed it off as just being part of the haunted experience. We were about to call it a night when I noticed a faint light coming from the direction of the old lighthouse tower, which was viewable from our room's window. The tower had been out of operation for years, so there was no reason for any light to be there. Feeling a mix of fear and curiosity, we decided to investigate. As we climbed the old, creaky staircase leading to the tower, the air grew colder, and an eerie silence enveloped us. Upon reaching the top, we were met with an unexpected sight. The old beacon was aglow with a spectral light that illuminated the room with an ethereal glow. Suddenly, we noticed a shadowy figure standing beside the beacon. It seemed to be a man dressed in the attire of a 19th century lighthouse keeper, just like Samuel. He appeared to be unaware of our presence and seemed to be conducting his duties, maintaining the beacon as if it were still operational. We stood there, frozen in fear and awe, watching as the ghostly figure carried out his tasks. After a few moments, the figure turned and looked directly at us. There was a profound sadness in his eyes, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. And then, as quickly as he had appeared, he vanished, leaving the room in complete darkness. The sudden silence was broken by our gasps of disbelief. We rushed back to our room, our hearts pounding. That night changed us. It gave us a glimpse into a world beyond our understanding. We were both frightened and fascinated by what we saw. We shared our experience with the innkeeper the next morning. He smiled knowingly and said that we were not the first guests to encounter Samuel. Our engagement period was marked by this incredible, shared supernatural experience. We returned home, not frightened, but feeling privileged to have witnessed something so extraordinary. We continued to be fascinated by the paranormal, but nothing ever came close to what we saw on the night of August 12th, 2013. So that's my story. A story I've held on to for a decade, finally finding the courage to share. Not everyone will believe it, and that's okay. But to those who have seen the unexplainable, I know you'll understand. I live in Topeka, Kansas, and there's this really strange thing I need to tell you. Not far from my house, deep in the woods, there's a big building surrounded by a tall fence. It's always been a mystery to us. My parents even thought it might be a secret science lab. They might be right because my friends and I saw something crazy when we were camping near it. We were having a normal camping night, telling spooky stories and roasting marshmallows. But as it got really dark, we heard a weird humming noise. It was coming from the direction of the fenced building. Being really curious, we decided to check it out. As we got closer, we could see the building was glowing in a creepy way, and the humming sound was way louder. Suddenly, we saw people in white suits running around. They were carrying strange-looking things and boxes. Then, out of nowhere, a huge part of the building's wall burst open. Out came this giant creature that looked like a wolf, but it was standing on its back legs. It was totally unreal, and it scared us a lot. The creature quickly ran off into the woods. The people from the building didn't waste any time. They grabbed what looked like dart guns and started chasing the wolf creature. A loud siren started going off from the building, which made us even more scared. We ran as fast as we could all the way back home. The next day, after hardly any sleep, we met up in my backyard to talk about what happened. We had so many questions. What was that creature? Was it part of some weird experiment? We decided to tell our parents about it. They didn't really believe us at first, but they saw how scared we were and promised to talk to the police about it. Despite their efforts, the police didn't take our story seriously, and we never found out what that building was for or what happened to the wolf creature. But we know we saw something totally out of this world. It was a real-life adventure that reminded us that sometimes real life can be scarier and stranger than any ghost story. I rolled into the small town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. My job as a journalist had brought me here to investigate reports of a mysterious creature, locally known as the Mothman. The descriptions I heard from the townsfolk painted a chilling picture, a creature standing 5 to 6 feet tall with large red eyes that reflected fear and wings as large as its body. Intrigued, I decided to spend a night camping in the dense forest near the town. As the sun set, the forest seemed to grow eerier, and the isolation began to crawl under my skin. I shrugged off the growing unease, reminding myself that I was here for a reason. to uncover the truth behind the Mothman sightings. As night fell, the forest came alive with sounds. The hooting of owls, the rustling of leaves, and the distant howling of a wolf. Then, a new sound. A low, rhythmic beating like the flapping of large wings. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The beating sound grew louder and seemed to draw closer. In the pitch darkness of the forest, I could barely make out a silhouette. A form that was too large to be any ordinary bird. Then, the red eyes. Two glowing orbs that pierced the darkness and stared right at me. The sight was both fascinating and terrifying. The Mothman. It was real. Shaken, I retreated into my tent, my mind reeling from the encounter. Was it fear, or was it the thrill of coming face to face with the legend itself? I was left with more questions than answers. As the dawn broke, I packed up my gear and headed back to the town. I had a story to write, one that would leave the readers in suspense about the reality of the Mothman. Returning to the town, my mind raced with thoughts of the encounter. Every creak of the trees, every rustle of leaves echoed the eerie memory of the creature. The Mothman. The townsfolk looked at me with a mix of anticipation and fear as I walked into the local diner. I was no longer just a journalist. I was a man who had come face to face with their legend. As I sat down to write my article, the haunting image of the red eyes in the dark forest refused to leave me. The silence of my room was broken by the rhythmic tap of my fingers on the keyboard. I started with the local folklore, the tales that had brought me here. The stories of a creature with large wings and reflective red eyes. My encounter with the Mothman was not just another story. It was a first-hand experience that had shaken me to my core. Yet as a journalist, I had a duty to share this experience. To let the world know about the creature that lurked in the forests of West Virginia. As I detailed my encounter, the words seemed inadequate to express the fear and the excitement. The sight of the glowing red eyes in the darkness. The chilling sound of the flapping wings. The fear that had frozen me in place. The realization that the Mothman was not just a story. It was real. As I finished my article, I realized that I had not just written a story. I had shared an experience that would leave the readers questioning the reality of the Mothman. The tale of the Mothman was no longer just a local legend. It was a suspenseful reality that the world needed to know. I arrived at the remote cabin feeling grateful for the escape from the busy city life. The peaceful surroundings made me appreciate the natural beauty that I had been missing for so long. However, as the nights progressed, I started hearing strange noises outside the cabin. At first, I thought it was just some wildlife moving around, but the noises continued and became more eerie. It was then that I decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight, I stepped outside the cabin. The silence of the forest seemed to amplify the beating of my heart. As I ventured further into the forest, the noises grew louder, but they no longer sounded like animals. There was a chilling quality to them that made me wonder what was making them. That's when I saw it. The creature that still haunts my nightmares. It was tall as a tree, and had a face that looked like a skull. Its body was nothing more than a collection of bones, with bits of skin and fur hanging from them, making it look like it was rotting away. The eyes of the creature were glowing red, and I could see the sharp teeth when it opened its mouth to let out a howl. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move. I watched the creature for what seemed like hours, but in reality, it was only for a few seconds. I couldn't find the courage to face it, and I retreated back to my cabin. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't help but wonder what the creature was. I had never seen anything like it before. Its appearance had been so shocking and surreal that I had to wonder if it had been a figment of my imagination. The next night, I decided to keep watch outside the cabin. I sat on a wooden stool with a shotgun in my lap, waiting for the creature to return. The night was dark, with only the moonlight and stars casting a faint light in the forest. The silence was eerie, but I was determined to catch a glimpse of the creature. Hours passed, and the cold began to seep into my bones. Just when I was about to give up, I heard a sound that made my heart skip a beat. It was the same sound I had heard before. My eyes searched the darkness, and I could see a figure in the distance, moving towards me slowly. My hands shook as I raised my shotgun, ready to fire. But as the creature got closer, I realized that it was the same creature I had seen before. Its eyes glowed red in the dark, and its breath was visible in the cold air. I could see its skeletal frame clearly now. The creature was taller than me by several feet, and its body was covered in fur and skin that hung off its bones. It made a low, guttural growl, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I tried to steady my breathing, but my heart was pounding so hard that it made my vision blurry. The creature stood still, watching me. It seemed to be studying me, as if trying to understand why I was there. I don't know how long I stood there, face to face with the creature. It could have been minutes or hours, but it felt like an eternity. Finally, it let out a howl and took off into the night. I was left alone in the darkness, trying to process what had just happened. I packed up my belongings and left the cabin, never looking back. The memory of the creature continued to haunt me long after I left Montana.